Okay, welcome to this lesson on drawing quadratic graphs. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to plot a quadratic graph by working out the coordinates and joining those up. Also, we're going to look at a few of the types of questions they might ask you in the exam when you've drawn a quadratic graph, and you should be able to answer those afterwards as well. So, with the email that you got with this link, we sent you a document that looks like this, which has a copy of all the questions that I'm going to work through on this video. Now, I'm not going to suggest that you copy that out because you're going to do plenty of practice of actually doing these types of questions yourself, but it might well be worth stopping the video now and reading that document just so you know what types of things I'm about to do. So open the document, have a read of the types of questions, and then we'll have a go. So the first one on there is this one, where it asks you to plot some points to draw the curve y equals x squared. Now obviously you're all working at home, so unlike in school where you might have a nice printed version, you and I've drawn my axes out longhand, and when you answer the questions from the sheet that your teacher has sent you, that's what you're going to need to do as well. Now often in the exam they'll give you a table that looks something like this with some of the values filled in already, and that's kind of to give you a little bit of a hint to start with and to help you get going, make sure you're doing it right. So how do we plot this curve here? This curve here is y equals x squared. How do I know it's going to be a curve? Let's start with that. It's a quadratic graph, it's got an x squared in it, and any time it has an x squared in it, I am expecting a graph of that shape there. It might be upside down, and we'll come to one of those later, but if it's got x squared in it, then I'm expecting a graph that looks this kind of shape. In the previous unit we did straight line graphs which had the format y equals mx plus c. In this unit we're going to look at some things which have got squares in it, and I'm therefore going to expect a graph that looks like that. So what does this rule mean? This rule means that if I know what the x value is, then I need to just square it to find out the y value that goes with it. So let's look at the two that they've given us and just check that I understand. Let's start with the positive one. They're always easier. And so my x value here is 2. My rule says to find my y value, I need to square that 2, and hence they get 4. Likewise, let's check I understand down in the negatives. Minus 3, square it. Negative times negative makes positive. 3 times 3 makes 9. Hence I've got that. So let's fairly quickly fill in the rest of these. Now usually I would start at the positives because we're better at positive numbers. So let's get going up here. So I'm going to start here with the 4. So when x is 4, 4 squared, 16. So I'm going to write 16 in there. 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9. When x is 1, 1 squared is 1. 1 times 1 is still 1. And so my y value will be 1. 0 squared, 0 times 0 is 0. Minus 1 squared, minus times a minus makes a positive. 1 times 1 makes 1. Negative 2 squared, minus times minus positive. 2 times 2 is 4. And minus 4 times minus 4 is 16. So I've fairly fast filled in my table. And now I'm going to transfer that information onto the graph here. So this is my x value, this is my y value, and if you think of coordinates, the x value goes first, the y value goes second. So that just turns into the coordinate minus 4, 16. So minus 4, 15, 16. Next one, minus 3, 9. And again, I'm just going to write this out, but you don't need to. Once you get good at this, you can just go straight to the graph. So negative 3 and 9, minus 2, 4, minus 1, 1, and 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9, and 4, 16, there's 15, so 16 there. Okay, so you'll see already you can start to see that nice, no, that one's wrong because I didn't go straight up from 4, let's try again. That nice curvy shape, and I could see that something wasn't right because I managed to look at my axis wrong and not put it on the 4. Next up, you need to join those dots, and you do need to join those dots. It's not a line of best fit, it is a curve, and so you're going to join these dots up with a smooth curve. You get a point in the exam for the smoothness of your curve, so make sure it's decent, and make sure you're using a pencil. I'm using a pink pen so that you can see it on the screen, but if you're doing this in the exam, please do it in pencil, because then if your curve isn't smooth, you can rub rub it out and start again. If you struggle with getting your curve smooth, turn it upside down. It's often easier to draw the curve from the inside than it is to draw it from the outside. Helps you get it smooth. So if you're rubbish at drawing curves, do it from the inside, maybe turn your paper upside down. If you're brilliant at it, obviously just draw it. Okay. So I've got a nice smooth curve, looks the shape that I was expecting, all is good. And now there were 3 questions at the bottom. So the questions at the bottom on the document we sent you is it asks for the minimum point. So that's just the bottom of the curve. So where the curve is at its lowest. So I think that's here. So in here I'm going to write 0, 0. Next up, all of these quadratic curves should be symmetrical. So when you've drawn them, they should have a mirror line, and that mirror line will always go through the bottom of the curve. So if they have asked me to draw the mirror line in, I think it's there because that goes through the bottom of the curve and it's symmetrical on either side. And lastly, they asked me for the equation of that line. Now, we did this unit a couple of weeks ago, so either you can just write that down straight away without any trouble at all, or you're still getting your head around how do these equations work, in which case I'm going to do it slowly for you. So if you don't know what that line I just drew is called, first thing I would do is just write down some coordinates on that line. So that was 0, -5. This one here is 0, 0. This one up here is 0, 5, and this one up here is 0, 10. That will, I think, be enough to work out what's going on. And then you have a look at those coordinates and you think, okay, what was special about all those coordinates I just wrote down? Well, look, here's what they've all got in common. That first number is always a 0. So when I plot a coordinate, remember I plot the x number and then the y number, and all those coordinates I just wrote down had an x number that was 0. So the equation of that line is x equals 0. And for some of you, you know that already and you can just write that down. You don't need to faff around writing all those coordinates out. For some of you, you'll keep forgetting that, and then that's the surefire way to make sure you get that right. Okay, let's look at example 2. That's example 3. Let's shuffle my pages. Here we go. So a little bit more complicated because the equation just got a little bit harder. So x squared minus x. So let's check that I understand the equation and I can get these 2 right first, because if I can get those 2 right, I'm fairly confident that I'll get those 2 sorted. So what does this equation mean? This says square my x value and then subtract my x value. So when my x value is 3, I'm going to do 3 squared, which is 9, and then take away that x value that I'm working with, which is 3. Hence they've got 6. I did 9, take away 3. Let's check down here because the negatives are the harder ones. Let's make sure we know that one. So the equation is x squared minus x, and my x value this time is -1. So -1 squared, well, minus times a minus makes a plus, and 1 times 1 makes 1. So I think I get 1 there. And then I'm going to take away my x value. Well, my x value this time is -1, so I'm taking away -1. So really I'm trying to do 1 minus -1. And for hopefully you know that when I minus a minus number, it's like adding. So really that says 1 plus 1, and hence they got 2. So I'm fairly confident I understand the equation. Now I can go and fill everything else in. And this is my second take on this video because it all went wrong the first time, and one of the things I've learnt is I've left myself more space to do this working. So let's look at the 0. The equation is x squared minus x, and my x number this time is 0. So 0 squared, 0. Take away, that x number is still 0. So 0 take away 0, I'm going to write 0 in there. Let's look at this one. X squared minus x, and this time my x number is 1. So 1 squared is 1. Take away my x number, which is 1. 1 take away 1 is 0. And lastly, this one. So this time my x number is 2. So 2 squared, 4. Take away my x number, 2. 4 take away 2 gives me 2. So now I'm going to do exactly what I did last time. I'm just going to scroll. I can't quite get all of that in for you, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of moving backwards and forwards. First coordinate is -1, 2. So first coordinate, -1, 2. Second coordinate, 0, 0. Then 1, 0. 1 across, none up. 2, 2 and 3, 6. Let's do those in one go. 2, 2 and 3, 6. Okay, so firstly, let's have a look. Does it look that nice curvy shape? Yeah, kind of. This time, these two at the bottom here are horizontal. There's something going on there that last time it was all nice, wasn't it? You had that lovely bit here where you just join them up. Now this time, they're going to expect you to use the fact that you know you want that nice curvy shape. And therefore, what they're testing really is to check that you don't suddenly go straight across at the bottom here and break that nice curve. So if you've got two crosses lined up like this, you know that it needs to be this nice curvy shape. So you're going to have to sort of invent the curve below those two crosses. Now clearly they're lined up, so the bottom will be halfway between them, because it's all symmetrical. We talked about that on the last slide. And you're just going to have to follow that curve down and kind of guess a little bit as to how much below those two crosses it would be for a nice smooth curve. So you can see I didn't go straight across. That's what they're testing. They're testing to find out whether you know that. And just below here, I've created that nice smooth curve. And they'll allow me a little bit of leeway if I go a little bit further or a little bit shallower, because obviously I'm estimating where that bottom of that curve is. So again, on this one, they asked me for two things. They asked me for the minimum point. So that's the bottom of my curve, which that's 0.5. And if I go across to here, well, that's -1, that's minus 0.5. So I reckon mine is about minus 0.25. But if you've drawn your minimum point on and it's in a slightly different place, they're going to give you a bit of leeway because we created that. Next up, line of symmetry. So that's straight down the middle through that bottom point that I created myself. And again, I need to label it. I need to work out the equation of the line of symmetry. And either you just know it, in which case you whiz through and you write it down, or you're not so sure, in which case you write down some coordinates of some points until you know what the equation of that line is. So I've written down a few points, and straight away I can see that this first number, the x number, is always 0.5. So that line is called x equals 0.5. Okay, let's do the next one, example 3. Oh, I've forgotten to write the equation of the curve down. We were doing this on this one. Okay, that should be on the printout that we sent you. So let's check I understand this equation, because this, again, it's got a bit more complicated. So I'm going to do 4 times the x number, and then I'm going to subtract whatever I get when I square that number I'm working with. So let's look at how did they get the 3 here. So let's check we understand the equation. So my x number here is 3. 4 lots of 3, I think that makes 12. And then I'm going to subtract x squared, whatever I get when I square this number. So I think 3 squared is 9. So I think the sum I am doing there is 12 take away 9, hence they got 3. Let's check I understand out here. So the negatives are the ones that will go wrong. If you don't get that nice smooth curve like I did, and it goes all higgledy-piggledy with a jagged bit, that will almost certainly be one of your negative numbers has gone wrong. So just check that. So my x number is -1. 4 lots of -1 I think is -4. And I'm going to take away whatever I get when I square my x number. So what do I get when I square -1? -1 times -1 I think gives me +1. So my calculation that I need to do is -4, take away another 1. Think of a number line, think of -4, taking away goes that way. So -4 minus 1 more gives me -5. Now let's do the rest. Now I think I understand the equation. So 4x minus x squared. This time my x value is 0. So 4 lots of 0, still 0. Take away 0 squared. Well, 0 times 0 is 0. So nothing, take away nothing, gives me nothing. Okay, I'm going to do this one down here. So 4x take away x squared. This time x is 1, so 4 lots of x, 4 lots of 1. Take away x squared, well x is 1, 1 squared is 1 still. So I'm doing 4 take away 1 gives me 3. I've run out of space. I have to do this one over here. Look, already gone all over my graph. Tried to stop doing that this time. So when x is 2, 4 lots of 2 is 8. Take away, what do I get when I square the 2? I get 4, so I think I've got 4 in there. Let's speed up a little bit here. 4 lots of 4 is 16. Take away 4 squared is 16. So 16 take away 16 is 0. And lastly, this one, x is 5. 4 lots of 5 is 20. And I need to take away what I get when I square 5. So take away 25. I think that gives me minus 5 in there. And now I'm going to plot those on my graph and regret the fact that I've drawn all over it. 0, 0, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3. Oh, not too bad. It hasn't quite overlapped with my writing. 4, 0, and 5, minus 5. Now, you'll notice this time it's gone the other way up. Oh, missed. This is why you're doing it with a pencil, so when you miss your crosses, you can rub it out and get your marks for the smooth curve. So I've joined up my dots. Now it's upside down this time. Now I did know that because of this minus sign here. If you've got a minus sign in front of your x squareds, then that has the effect of flipping your curve upside down. So I was expecting that, and you should expect that. If your x squareds got a negative in front of it, then you can expect your curve to be the other way up. Now, some harder questions came with this one. It said, draw on y equals 2. Hence means you have to use what you just did. Solve this equation. Well, we'll work out what that means in a second. And then explain why there are no solutions to this. So let's deal with the easy bit first. I either just know what y equals 2 looks like and I just draw it on, or I'm not so sure, in which case I write a list of coordinates that fulfill that rule. So the y coordinate needs to be 2. So let's make an x coordinate of 3 and a y coordinate of 2. And another point on that line, an x coordinate of 5 and a y coordinate of 2. Because it doesn't matter what I do as long as the y coordinate is 2. And an x coordinate of minus 1 and a y coordinate of 2. And now I'm just going to plot those on my picture. So minus 1, 2, 5, 2, 3, 2. And you can see those 3 points that I just drew just lined up in a straight line. So this is the line y equals 2. Now some of you will just be able to draw that straight away. Some of you need to write out a list of coordinates till you know what the line looks like. Both are fine. So then it said, and let's try and relate that to the next bit. So it said, hence solve 4x minus x squared equals 2. Well, let's have a think about why they might say hence. The very first thing they asked me to do was to draw this equation here, this graph here, y equals 4x minus x squared. 4x minus x squared. So this is the first curve I drew, y equals 4x minus x squared. The second thing they asked me to draw was y equals 2. And that was the straight line that I drew. So really, all this question is asking me is, where does this curve that you drew at the beginning cross this line that you've just drawn? Because you want them to be equal, you want them to be in the same place at the same time. This is the curve I drew in part A. This is the thing I just drew. So all it's really asking is, where do these two things cross? So let's look at my picture. And and again, I drew this curve freehand, so if you've done the same question, you might get slightly different values to me, and that's okay. They'll give you some variation as long as it fits with your curve. So where did those two things cross? Well, this one I reckon crossed at 3.5. And this one crossed about 0.6. So the two x values that fulfill this equation are the two places on my graph where these two lines crossed. So to answer this question, I just write this 0.6 and my 3.5. Both of those answers are places where these two curves are in the same place at the same time. Lastly, it says, explain why there are no solutions to 4x minus x squared equals 6. Well, again, this is the curve we've got already, but we haven't got this line yet. So what I'm going to do first is draw the line y equals 6. And again, either I just know what that looks like, or I write a list of coordinates that have a y value of 6. And I plot those on my graph. Now I do regret my earlier writing all over my graph. Look, 3, 6, 2, 6, and 4, 6. So I'm trying to do those back in my purple pen because I've written all over the graph, and obviously that's very helpful of me. So that's the line y equals 6. And remember, when we're trying to solve this equation here, I'm looking for the places where the curve I drew at the beginning crosses the line I've just drawn. And if you look back at your picture, the line I've just drawn doesn't cross the line I drew at the beginning. And so when it says explain why there are no solutions, I'm just going to write because the curve does not cross the line y equals 6. Okay? Now that's quite a tricky question, and for some of you that will make your head hurt slightly, and we'll come back to that later on. But for some of you that will be like, oh yeah, I can see how that works. So if you're really struggling with this question, miss these questions out when you get to them. Okay, last one. And again, I've forgotten to write down what curve we were going to draw, so I'll just put that in. So, last one. And again, just made the equation a little bit more complicated. Principle's still the same. And for some of you, if your number works good, you'll just be like, yeah, I can just do that. And you'll be able to fill this table in really quickly. Fast forward through this bit of the video because I'm going to do this quite slowly to make sure everybody understands how we get these coordinates. And if you agree my coordinates there, you can rejoin this video when we get to the bit where we're talking about how to plot this graph. So this 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. So quite a lot going on this time. Let's start here with the 2x squared and let's just make sure we understand this. So 2x squared, I need to do some doubling and some squaring. And if you think back to your bid maths, you should, I hope, know that the squaring is more important than the multiplying, and therefore I need to do the squaring first. So when I do 2x squared, I need to square the x value first and then double it afterwards. And I need to make sure I do that the right way around, otherwise I'll get the wrong answer. Once I've worked that bit out, then I'm going to add on 3 lots of the x value and then take away 5 at the end. So quite a lot. Let's just check, and I'll try not to write all over my graph this time. I've left myself more space. Let's just check we understand for the 2 they gave us. So 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. So x is 2. So 2x squared, square it first. 2 times 2 is 4, and then double it, makes 8. Then I'm going to add on 3x, 3 lots of this. So 3 lots of 2 I think is 6. And then at the end it just says take away 5, so then I take away 5. 8 plus 6 I think is 14, take away 5, I think I agree they're 9. And I'm going to check the negative as well, just to make sure that my negative numbers aren't going to go haywire. And let's check again. So negative 3. Remember, square it first. Negative 3 times negative 3, positive 9. And then double it, 18 I think. And then I'm going to add on 3 lots of x, 3 lots of minus 3. So I think 3 lots of minus 3, positive times negative is negative. So 3 lots of minus 3 is minus 9. And then I'm going to take away the 5 on the end. And hopefully you're happy that if I add a negative number, it's just like taking away. So really this line says 18, take away 9, take away 5. 18 take away 9, that's 9, take away 5, gives me 4. Now I'm going to do the positives first because they're easier. And then by the time I get to the negatives, I'll understand the formula a bit better and I'll be quicker. So ready? This time my x value is 1. So I'm going to do 1 squared. 1 times 1 is 1, times 2 gives me 2. And then 3x, 3 lots of 1. I think 3 lots of 1 is 3. And then it says take away 5, so I'll take away 5. 2 plus 3 is 5, take away 5, I think gives me nothing in there. Okay, this time I'm going to put a box around my graph to stop me drawing all over it. Let's do this one here. So this time I'm working with 0. 0 squared, that's nothing. 0 times 0 is 0, times 2. 0 times 2 is still 0. Plus 3 lots of 0. 3 lots of nothing is still nothing. Take away 5. So this is 0 plus 0 is 0. Take away 5 is minus 5. Let's do this one. So x squared times 2. Minus 1 times minus 1 is positive 1. And then I need to double it, gives me 2. And then I'm adding 3 lots of minus 1. So 3 lots of minus 1 is minus 3. And then I'm taking away 5. So if I am doing 2 plus minus 3, that's like doing 2, take away 3, and then take away 5. So how do I do that? Well, think of a number line, and I could use my graph to count along if I'm not sure. Start at 2, take away 3. Remember, take away goes this way. So 1, 2, 3. And then I need to take away 5 more after that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Takes me, I think, down to minus 6. And lastly, this one, so minus 2. I'm going to squeeze this down the bottom here. However much space I've left, it wasn't quite enough. So 2x squared, minus 2 times minus 2 is 4, and then double it, I think gives me 8. And then I'm going to add 3 lots of the minus 2, so that's minus 6, and then take away 5. And remember, just like last time, this is like doing 8 take away 6. It's like doing 8 take away 6 and then taking away the 5. So 8 take away 6 is 2, take away another 5, I think gives me minus 3. So let's plot those. 2, 9, 1, 0, 0, minus 5, minus 1, minus 6, minus 2, minus 3, and minus 3, 4. Now, looking at this, I just need to be a little bit careful this time, because unlike some of the last times, these crosses don't quite look all nicely lined up. They're not quite symmetrical. And that's not because I've drawn it wrong. It's just because the line of symmetry is not nicely on the middle of a square like it was last time. So I just need to think a little bit about where's the bottom of the curve. So if I look, these numbers here are all quite high. And so when I want to put in the bottom of my curve, you can see it's shallowing off here, but it's probably going to dip and come something like that. I don't think that's the bottom of the curve, because this one is higher than this one. So if this was the bottom of the curve, that cross would line up here and you get a nice symmetry around this cross, but that can't quite be the bottom because this one's a little bit higher. So I think that it's going to go something like, and it's just going to dip a little bit below there before it comes up the other side. Okay, is that right, or should it dip on that? No, I think it's going to, that one's higher, so is that right? Doesn't look quite right, does it? Looks like it should dip on this side. It did that last time. That's better. That's better. So you've done this in pencil and you've done a much better job than me. But I think, look, that one's there, and this one's much higher, so it's still quite steep. So I'm going with my bottom of my curve should go like that. And that is the reason you're going to do it in pencil. So we've now sent you a whole load of questions to do. So hopefully I've talked you through the steps and you can now do the questions on the sheet that we've sent you. Again, it's going to take you forever to copy out the axes, so make sure you stick to the timings. Don't try and finish everything.